if that's what you're doing. Imagine everything you in your bank account in an instant evaporating. All your possessions lose value, you're fired, and your family's stuck in a rut. This was a grim reality for most people alive during the 1930s in America. Families were destroyed, suicide rates skyrocketed, and the world market collapsed. And at the center of this was the United States economy. This period of time was known as the Great Depression. The Great Depression wasn't like the U.S. was in a bad situation before the Great Depression. It was preceded by the roaring 20s where the U.S. economy was booming. Everything was going great. It was about a decade or so, starting like 1918 through 1928 of just economic growth in the U.S. But when 1928 happened, a recession hit the U.S., and as a new nation, we weren't really sure what to do about this. We hadn't been hit by a recession like this before. So it proceeded to get worse through 1929, and in the fall of 1929, in October, an event happened called Black Thursday. And on Black Thursday, all value in the stock market dropped 28%, devastating the economy worldwide, as companies lost all value and shareholders lost all the money they invested in the companies. And this took the value of the US dollar and made it practically nothing. Now, to cope with this situation, the federal government attempted to resuscitate the economy by inflating the value of the dollar. But when they did this, they forgot to put more money into circulation, which just blew up the price of the dollar to where things weren't able to be purchased because everything was too expensive. And this may seem like a dark way for it to start, but one good thing that came out of this is that journalist Kimberly Amadio pointed out that due to the extreme consequences of this lack of knowledge and lack of preparation, the U.S. had this happen to them. But now, because of this situation, we'll never go through another depression as bad as this one. And Steve Fiorio from The Street, not The Street, but the journalism thing, The Street, pointed out that there was three main effects of the Great Depression. Unemployment skyrocketed, and this began around 1920, 28, and it kept growing until 1932, where unemployment was at 25%. So 1 in 4 people didn't have a job in the U.S. And it didn't get higher than that, but it started to lower, but it didn't get below 10% until World War II happened, and we began having jobs creating things for the war. And another huge effect of the Great Depression was banks across the country began closing, and everyone who had money in the bank no longer had money in the bank. You lost everything you held in it. People were rapidly taking their money out of it, and because the banks didn't have any more money, it just continued to collapse, and the government was refusing to give the banks money to help the civilians. And because of this, came to the third effect of the Great Depression, which is it allowed FDR to be nominated because the people needed someone who they felt would represent them. There's a few other effects of the Great Depression that went underlooked in this article, which he didn't point out the Dust Bowl, which was a huge effect of the Great Depression, as farmers had no money to support themselves, and the country went through a food crisis because of an arid temperature and no funding for the government. So a lot of crops just died for a couple of years straight. And the Great Depression backhandedly caused World War II as well, because the U.S. during that time was funding Germany on their war debts before the Great Depression struck. And once the U.S. no longer could fund Germany, it fell into a crisis as well, which allowed Adolf Hitler to rise into power. And the third thing I looked up for, and History.com was credited for this, is FDR was pretty much responsible for dragging us out of the Depression. Because of him, we had a Democratic government now instead of the Republican one that we were using before, and he was able to put in social programs that allowed the U.S. to expand, and we began getting more involved. We closed down the banks for 4 days and passed new legislators so that we were able to help the civilians. He created new jobs through the New Deals Act, and eventually he drug us out through World War II as new jobs in the economy were created. Now, the Great Depression seems like it was all bad, but it was a learning spot for our country, and it's a part of history that shouldn't be forgotten. And what caused it and the effects of it and how we got out of it are all very important to remember. And that's my speech. All right, I'll take that.